Hello, my name is Dr. AAlexander. I am coming to you today to share with you about communicating good news to different worldviews. I have served with OMF for 40 years. I am also serving with Bible telling, and now I am at Urbana Theological Seminary as an associate professor of incarnational ministries. And today I want to share with you some things that I've learned about the importance of understanding whom we're talking to when we go about sharing good news. I don't know if we sat down together and were chatting over a cup of coffee or tea, how you would feel about if I asked you a question about how often you actually bring up the topic of Jesus and faith when you're talking to people in your neighborhood or people in your circles of influence. I know that for most people in America, they don't share their faith very well or very easily because they're really afraid of, in this particular climate, what will happen and what will be the result and response of the people they're talking to. We have certainly a wide variety of very conflicting worldviews going on in America right now, as well as they would have been in Jesus' day. Think of it. Israel was an occupied country. It was the crossroads of the world. The people had to travel through Israel to get to anywhere. So there were people from all places doing business, doing politics, soldiers from all over the Roman Empire, as well as conflicting sects of Judaism, and also the secular people that lived in Israel at the time. So our culture is no less complex or more complex than the culture was in Jesus' day. And yet Jesus was able to communicate clearly to those who were there. I think we have to do some more research, some more studies, some more soaking in his word to see how Jesus successfully did that kind of communicating in a way that communicated to people from very different backgrounds with very different values and very different purposes in life. So today we want to get together and just chat a bit about what it might be like, perhaps. And also, I want to introduce to you 3 different worldviews. They're not the only worldviews that you can see in the Bible, but they are throughout the Bible. And I want each of you to be able to, the next time you read, to take your own worldview glasses off for a bit and just kind of notice the different kinds of emphases that are in the Bible as you go through and study it. I will be giving you more materials at the end. You will be able to access them because this is a very, very short period of time. But I would hope that you will think about this a lot more as time goes by, because I know that you probably have a Muslim on one side and a Buddhist on the other side, and perhaps a agnostic across the street, or perhaps someone who's flying a rainbow flag. Who knows? But those people need love too, and Jesus loves them as well as he loves us. I am hoping and praying that for us, this period of time will be a very rich time. And so let's get to the subject, and let me tell you what a favorite author of mine, James W. Sire, says worldview is in his book, Naming the Elephant, Worldview as a Concept, 2004, InterVarsity Press. He says, worldview is a collection of attitudes, values, stories, and expectations about the world around us, which inform our every thought and action. Well, what about worldview? How does it truly affect the people around you? I know that for me, in my experience in Taiwan as a missionary, I encountered some surprising situations to me at the time. And it really woke me up to the fact that what I take for granted isn't what other people take for granted. And what I desire isn't what other people desire necessarily. And what I fear is not what other people fear. And so let me just tell you some stories. As a new missionary in Taiwan, I was living in an apartment building. There was a girl upstairs, a young woman, and she was a student at a prestigious university. And so was her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was a philosophy major at one of the most outstanding universities in Taiwan at the time. She wanted to invite him to come over and meet the 2 foreigners in her building and have him practice his English on us. And she wanted, I think, just also to listen to what would happen then, because she knew that we were Christians. And so she brought her boyfriend over, and my roommate Nancy and I were sitting down with him to chat about a lot of things. But of course, Jesus came up. And so we were talking with him about how the smartest thing in the world for anybody, really, given the consequences of other choices, is really to believe in Jesus. And we spent a period of time, one would talk and the other would pray. And we saw this man's understanding become enlightened. And so asked, well, have you heard enough reasons why it really is wise to become a believer? And he said, yes. Would you like to make that decision tonight? And he said, oh, I can't do that. I'm Chinese. I'm a Buddhist. And that closed and slammed and locked the door for him. He comes from an honor-shame culture where people belong to their families and they don't want to bring dishonor on their families by turning their back on traditional religion, which includes Buddhism and Confucianism and sometimes worship of other kinds of gods, and refuse to burn incense to and to honor those parents who have raised them. So his thought was he would be just abandoning his culture if he became a believer in Jesus Christ, which he saw as a foreign religion. Well, another man that I was on a long bus trip with, I'll call him Abraham. And Abraham and I sat next to each other and we got into talking about this and that. And the topic of faith came up and I found out that he went to church. I was so excited. I said, oh, well, when did you become a Christian? And he said, oh, no, I'm half a Christian. Half a Christian? Yeah, I believe, but I can't get baptized until my parents die. Why? Well, if they knew that I wasn't going to burn incense to their spirits after they died, they would be really angry and upset and sad. Abraham, a half Christian. Then there's the millennial who is a missionary kid that I know right here in America. And he doesn't accept Jesus because he can't figure out what possible reason somebody would give their life for, and why in the world everyone would think that that one person dying in that way would actually remove the sins of the whole world. So this young man is an atheist. And his wife, my dear friend and cousin, is in ministry. So that's what we call an honor-shame kind of worldview. And then there was another situation. I was in my second term, I was doing Bible college teaching, and I encountered an 11-year-old neighbor girl in a place where I had just moved to, and we'd become conversant, and I often like to walk my dog. And so one day I invited her to go with me, and she said, oh, no, I can't do that. My grandma just died and you want to walk by the graveyard. I'm afraid she might hurt me. So in her worldview, the spirits, even though they are the spirits of the people who have loved us, those spirits are enemies. They're evil. They are fearful, and she didn't want to go anyplace close to them. Well, there also is an old grandma that I knew who has since passed on. I know her whole family, and she was a profoundly convinced Buddhist. And after her husband died, she not only spent the entire fortune that he had left her on giving away money to Buddhist causes, but she borrowed money to give away because she was afraid that she would not have enough merit to get out of Buddhist hell, or not to come back as something else reincarnated. And so she was quite afraid. And unfortunately, she never came to Christ that I knew of. My other neighbor isn't religious. She says she's not religious, but when her husband went into an alcoholic coma, she went everywhere in town that she knew of where there was someplace that you could go and pray, and maybe the God that you prayed to would answer. And she asked me to pray too, and I was a good friend. Actually, we were more like part of the same family. And I prayed also for her husband, and he came out of his coma. But she didn't feel like that obligated her to believe in Jesus, because she had asked in so many different places. And that is what I call the lack of a fear of the right thing, the lack of the fear of the Lord. Later at the Bible college, I was teaching precept inductive Bible study ministries, and I was teaching lots of different Bible study courses, and as well as a bunch of other things. But I was also teaching at a church, and at the church we had a small group of people that were learning, and they were included a wealthy Chinese man whom I'll call George. George was in the class on Revelation, and you know how scary Revelation can be. And he suddenly looked really, really nervous. Now, mind you, he was a churchgoer, but he suddenly said, "You mean if I don't submit to Jesus and ask him into my heart, that I might have those things happen to me that happened to those people in Revelation?" And yes, we answered, it was true, you know? And so he said, "Well, what do I have to do?" And we had a lovely lay pastor who was one who visited prisons. And he said, "Well, you have to believe in Jesus in your heart, and you have to confess him before people, and you also have to get baptized according to the Bible." And so he said, I want to be baptized right now. So he was baptized out of a paper cup that day. And he also was baptized later in his church, more officially. But these different kinds of responses, I mean, he knew that he had done things wrong and he wasn't right with God, but he also knew that he needed to accept Jesus. He just hadn't been willing to surrender before that. So some of these are really from particular worldviews that are different, perhaps different from the ones that we hold. And so I would like to just sort of introduce these worldviews to you. And I won't have much time to introduce much about them, but I will say that throughout the Bible, in many of the Bible stories and many of the Bible passages, if you went through with colored pens, as I have done, and you underlined the phrases or the ideas in that passage that represent each of these different worldviews, you would find that many of the passages have all three, maybe 4 or 5 worldviews represented in each passage. So I would like to encourage you later to find ways of doing that and sort of ask yourself, how did Jesus and how does the Bible communicate with people across so many centuries in so many different countries and backgrounds in such a very clear and receivable way? So let me introduce these worldviews to you. The first one, guilt innocence, we in the Western world understand fairly well. Essentially, guilt innocence cultures do not emphasize rules and laws only, but they emphasize that people should internally have a conscience or a code of conduct. Moral responsibility comes from within. And justice is a sense of universal rightness, moral rightness. And since guilt comes from a wrong action, in order to solve that problem, you have to do a right action that balances it off, that fits the misdeed. So individualists derive identity and value from what they do. Okay? Sounds like America, maybe? Maybe a little bit. Okay, shame, honor societies, on the other hand, they assume a strong group orientation. Honor is a person's social worth, one's value in the ideas and the eyes of the community. And it comes from relationship. So that's a priority. Shame is negative public rating because the community thinks lowly of you. You are disconnected from the group. Shame on our cultures define morality relationally, not legally or abstractly. What is best for relationships is morally right in their eyes. Identity is based more on who you are rather than what you do. It says, shame says, I am a mistake, not I made a mistake. I am a mistake. And correcting shame requires a sort of remaking or transformation of the self. One's identity must change. You can see where guilt and shame are vastly different in the remedial thing that's needed there. All right, how about fear power? Fear power has 3 different areas that it refers to. And you have to ask yourself, in which cultures, okay? One is the religious aspect of spiritual control, which deals with powers that you can't see, like demons, like God. And fear power is very strong in some countries. Asia, Africa, but also in America. You'd be surprised. The other thing is social authority, and that's political, okay? In the political area, social authority is important. Now you see that when people are afraid of offending someone who is in power in their neighborhood or their family or their government. And also afraid of offending God, perhaps, although it's not in the religious area. And then psychological fear power is anxiety. So often decisions are made because of anxiety about the results or maybe other complex issues as well. And all of these are seen in the Bible. So these 3 are 3 of the major aspects of worldview. In addition, there's purity, pollution, and there's also patron-client, which is part of honor shame. It's been so wonderful being with you, and I really ask that you will go further in this and continue to research. God bless you, and may you continue to grow in the Lord and to see his work in your life. Goodbye.